This is GARIS Masculist MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 426, entitled Parental LATting, Pre and Post Divorce. Description. This flyer presents the advantages of the LATting, that's living apart together, lifestyle for singles, and extends its advantages to couples with children, speculating on multiple possible LATting lifestyles for couples with kids who are pre and post divorced. The flyer itself. Parental LATting, Pre and Post Divorce, by email Prof. Hugo de Garis at yahoo.com, website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. The title of this masculist flyer probably needs some explanation for most readers. LATting is living apart together, an increasingly popular lifestyle amongst so-called singles. I read some months ago that a quarter of singles in the UK actually LAT, that is, they live as couples, having two abodes and have part-time relationships with their LATting partner. I do this. I have a LAT girlfriend who has her own house, nicer than my 5-room bachelor pad. I spent 4 of my nights/days with her each week and the remaining 3 days/nights alone in my apartment. From the male point of view, LATting has several advantages. It forces the woman to be nice to the man, and vice versa, because the woman knows that if she starts nagging, withholds sex, tries to control the man, etc., then she will face a serious risk that her man will simply walk away from her, back to his own abode. It's highly likely that women evolved to nag men, because in the distant past, women were total parasites of men, depending on men to provide them with scarce male-hunted meat. Women evolved to be prostitutes to men, bribing men with sex in exchange for men's scarce hunted meat. The greater the level of control a woman could develop over a man, the more meat she was likely to obtain from him, thus increasing her chances of survival for herself and her kids. One way to get men to do what women want is for women to nag their men, getting her man to make an extra effort to give her what she wants in order to shut her up, because he does not want to risk that she gives her vagina to another man whom she might find more sexploitable. But by LATting, a man can avoid such problems by creating a period of sexual and social starvation each week, by simply not being present each week, thus making the woman, his partner, more appreciative of his company, his conversation, and his penis. Thus the man gets better, nicer companionship, better, more frequent sex, and leads a happier, more fulfilled lifestyle. The fact that a quarter of singles live like this does not surprise me now, since I can see from my own experience that it works. It works well. So I predict that it will become very popular in the future, particularly as women become more FIP, that's financially independent persons. There are other advantages with LATting, namely that one has the best of both worlds, that is, the companionship and sex from your partner, but also the freedom to do what you want to do during the time the two of you are apart. A synonym to LATting is my use of the term twee-tweffing, that is 2A, 2F equals 2 apartments, 2 FIPs, where a man and a woman are both FIPs and each has his/her apartment, so that when the relationship goes sour, as nearly all do, then the two of them simply walk back to their separate apartments, cost-free to the man, with no loss of custody of his kids, because a twee-tref relationship is childless. No alimony to the ex-girlfriend, since she is, by definition, a FIP, and no loss of the house, wealth and stuff to the ex-girlfriend, since she is a FIP and not a hated, fluffy parasite, as so many women still are today, by not bothering to get a career-competent education at high school and college, who then expect to be able to parasite off the money and labour of a man, making her an immoral, parasitic, man-slaving vermin, to be severely punished by men by being forced to rot on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and spat at. When a woman is a FIP and is not a misandrous, male-dumping, feminazi bitch, but is actually nice to her male partner, when a woman is bi-conscious, that is, she sees that gender oppression is a two-way street, being aware that women oppress men too, and in fact worse than vice versa, for example, with women's financial parasitism, women's man-slavery, women's fluffy feminist hypocrisy in the fluffy feminist dominated divorce courts, women's many decades-lasting gender crimes against men, for example, paternity fraud, in brackets, in about 5% of pregnancies, the husband is not the father. Women's pill lying, where the woman lies to her boyfriend/husband that she's taking the pill, but isn't, gets pregnant, then expects him, by law, to pay for a kid he does not want, thus manslaving him for decades, etc. Thus, LATting has many advantages for a man, so it's not surprising that millions of men are now opting for this new lifestyle, as did I. I feel that MGTOW monking is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Some MGTOWs are monks, but most aren't, preferring to get some sex and companionship from a woman, but certainly not marrying them and not having kids with them. Since until the gender laws are men-feared, especially in the hated, fluffy, feminist, hypocrite-dominated divorce courts, the majority of young men in many countries will continue their boycott of marriage and paternity, because the hated, fluffy feminists who have taken control of the divorce courts have made modern marriage so toxic for men that in many countries now young men reject marriage and paternity, thus causing whole populations to be wiped out, although in reality they are merely reacting to the indirect genocide created by the fluffy feminist divorce court lawyers and judges, who routinely financially massacre and destroy the lives of a quarter of fathers by ripping their kids away from them, giving the mother custody of the kids with a 90% probability, forcing the ex-husband to pay her child payments to kids he will barely see, forced to give his house to her so she can raise her kids in it, forced to give over half of his stuff and wealth to her, and if she's a real fluffy parasite who did not bother to FIP up at high school and college, he may be forced to pay her alimony until he dies, with no legal nor moral obligation on his fluffy parasite ex-wife to get off her fat parasitic ass and FIP up. Thus millions of young men around the world are taking up the LATting lifestyle, and lots of older men as well, such as myself. This got me thinking. LATting is fine for singles, that is, persons who are single, have no kids, or whose kids have grown up and fled the nest, as have my two. But how applicable would LATting be for couples with kids? And what would happen to a married couple with kids if there's a divorce? This flyer attempts to answer such questions, hence the title, that is, how could a LATting couple live, in practical terms, if they have kids, and how would they live if they divorce? This flyer provides some suggested answers. Since there are millions of people who live the LATting lifestyles, there will probably be many variations of LATting lifestyles that can be tried. Since I've not yet read anything on such alternative lifestyles, that is, parental LATting, I can only dream up my own ideas on this interesting topic. Here goes. I begin with couples with kids who are pre-divorced, that is, not yet divorced, who may even be happy living together. How might they live? What kinds of options do they have? I begin with some common sense observations. To be labelled a LATting couple, obviously there need to be two dwellings. This is not a solution for a poor couple, so is a lifestyle that is more commonplace in rich countries than in third world countries, for example. I can imagine that in some cases the couple have 2 houses, or 2 apartments, or a house and apartment, as is the case in my situation. I have an apartment and my female partner has a house, a very nice house, with a beautiful garden. That is one of her passions that she has given a lot of TLC to. For non-native English speakers, TLC means tender, loving care. Once LATting becomes very popular, couples with kids may decide to LAT as well. So how could they do that? They might decide to leave the kids in the nicer dwelling, for example, a house, and when one partner is not in that dwelling, then that partner lives in the other dwelling. In terms of time distribution, how might they do this? For example, imagine the couple decide to LAT on a 4-3 basis, as I do. That is, 4 days/nights together, 3 days/nights apart. So the couple may decide to live together for 4 days in the main dwelling with the kids, then alternating weekly live for 3 days a week in the main dwelling and for 3 days a week in the second dwelling. Thus, from the point of view of the kids, they would see each parent for 4 plus 1.5 days a week on average. Alternatively, the kids could swap dwellings on a weekly basis or 2 weekly bases. There are probably many such combinations of LATting that LATting couples can dream up. And since so many couples already LAT, then probably many possible combinations are already lived in the real world. I would like to learn more about this, but as I've said above, I've yet to hear of this. Now, what about divorce and LATting for couples with kids? One obvious question for the parental couple is how often could they tolerate each other's presence with the kids? Again, there are probably many combinations one can think of. An obvious one would be that the father and mother do not want to spend any time together, so when one parent is in the dwelling with the kids, the other parent is in the other dwelling. Probably most parents would prefer that the kids stay in the same dwelling for the sake of the kids' emotional stability and have the 2 parents swap their time in the main dwelling. Perhaps the parents might agree to be present together for several days each week in the dwelling with the kids until after the kids' bedtime. Then one of them moves to the other dwelling while the other parent stays with the kids for the night. The following week they could swap places. Anyone giving a bit of thought to these ideas can probably come up with an alternative, so there will be many such LATting schemes for divorced parents. Since I haven't read anything on the above ideas, I've been forced to speculate, so I would appreciate getting feedback on such ideas. Probably in the near future there will be more reports coming out on real-life LATting lifestyles, but I will just have to wait for that time to come. When it does, I may make a future Masculist flyer on this theme, which offers the best of both worlds to men by giving them the plus points of women, brackets, their companionship, their vaginas, and frees men from the negative points of women, brackets, nagging, controlling, sex deprivation, etc. By allowing men some days per week on his own, to do his own thing, doing what he wants to do, and not what some nagging bloody female demands that he do, and for her, which is probably how women evolve to behave in order to extract more resources from her man-slave. LATting is thus liberating for men, which probably explains why it is rapidly becoming increasingly popular, and may even become mainstream within a decade or so. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 420 plus Masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.